Thank the Senator. Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Director. Thanks for your testimony. I agree with you that if we're really going to move ourselves in the direction of economic growth and heal this deficit, is we need a credible and specific plan. And of course, the first step in that is going to actually have the Congress pass a budget, and specifically the Senate pass a budget. And unfortunately, we're going to be starting a week late in terms of the timetable set out in the Congressional Budget Act of 1974. The President's going to be 1 week late in submitting his budget. I certainly want to keep this committee's feet to the fire to try and get our work done with our budget proposal submitted by April 1st. In talking with Chairman Conrad, he said one of the problems that might hold us up there is CBO's reestimation of the budget. So can you give me some sort of timeline and give me assurances it won't hold up our work here?
Well, Senator, just as you want to hold the committee's feet to the fire, this committee and the House Budget Committee are holding our feet to the fire. We are starting a week late, as you said. Right. We will push along just as fast as we can. In conversations that we've had with the budget committees, we've said that we are aiming to release our March baseline and our analysis of the President's budget by the middle of March.
Okay.
Whether we can keep to that depends, importantly, on what turns up in the budget, which we haven't seen, and how hard it is for us to do the analysis of it. It also depends on what else Congress demands of us. We've made a tour of the leadership in the Democratic and Republican sides in the Senate and the House and pleaded for forbearance in doing estimates of other sorts of legislation over the next month and a half so we can focus on providing this new baseline, which is crucial for our your legislative work of the year and our estimates.
I appreciate that, and of course I didn't make a demand, but I did have a request that we spoke about earlier.
Yes.
I'm certainly concerned. I want to ask you in general about the risks to the budget that you see. What in addition to the baseline, what are the risks? Certainly from my standpoint, and we've had this discussion, I'm highly concerned about what the true cost of the health care law is. Specifically, we had conversations about, I believe, credible evidence that this is underestimated in terms of the number of employees that will lose their employer-sponsored care. It sounds like your office has been working on that. Can you just give me an update in terms of when we might have a reassessment of that estimate?
Yes. The first thing is that this outlook doesn't include a comprehensive reestimate of the coverage provisions of the Affordable Care Act. That will be part of our March baseline. It's a very involved process. We actually get more health data this time of year. So it's not in here. It will be in the March baseline. So you will see in that our assessment, our best assessment at that point of the effects of the law. We're also separately working on an analysis that is well along but not yet finished of the consequences for the budget if we are wrong in our assessment of the effects of the legislation. And we're looking at a range of alternative parameter values of some of the crucial assumptions. And each of those requires us to do a whole separate set of estimates, essentially, so it takes some time. But we're pushing hard on that, and as soon as that's done, we will give that to the Congress. A number of people have asked.
I really would encourage you to take a look at a realistic worst-case scenario, because we are far, far from that with the million-person estimate right now. Douglas Holsaken talked about 35 million. I would argue far higher, having bought health care and made those decisions. So, again, I encourage you to really take a hard look at that.
I understand, Senator.
In terms of risk to the budget, from my standpoint, cost of health care, interest rate risk, I'm looking at your interest rate assumptions. They certainly don't take into account should we hit a European-style debt crisis. Speaking of Europe, I don't see anything, or I'm certainly concerned about what could happen, budgetary effects of a European contagion. We had an excellent hearing here yesterday to that effect. And the suggestion really was from those witnesses, have CBO take a look at that as potentially an alternate scenario. And then just growth projections. What is, by the way, the last 50 years, what is the average growth rate of the U.S. economy?
Senator Johnson, could I just stop you on that
Sure.
point? Because Senator Johnson has said something, and I don't want to let this moment pass by without riveting the point. I don't want it to just kind of float by here. What he is saying is exactly correct with respect to yesterday's hearing, and they suggested that we ask CBO to take a look at what we might expect if we have a further erosion in Europe. And I think that is absolutely critical because it's one of the biggest risk factors that we face out there. I want to make sure this doesn't come off Senator Johnson's time. So restore his time.
That took about 5 minutes, by the way. Well, thank you, Senator Conrad. That is important. So just getting back to my primary point, I've just listed 4 things. I would encourage CBO to really take a look at what are significant risks and give us some sort of feedback on that.
So as you know, Senator, these projections that we make are fraught with uncertainty. And the uncertainty is very wide. In particular, projections of the deficit or projections of the difference between 2 very, very large numbers. And one doesn't have to be off by very much in the projection of revenues or the projection of spending to be off by a large multiple of the projected deficit. We work very hard to have projections that are in the middle of the distribution of possible outcomes. It's not our objective, as described by the Congress, for us to deliver the worst case projection, but we do think about alternatives. We were not able in this report to illustrate the effects of alternatives quantitatively. We have, as you know, in the appendix, a table that looks at some rules of thumb, but we didn't go all the way from what particular things happen in Europe or elsewhere, how would that matter? For what it's worth, the projection is conditioned on what we say is a shallow recession in the Eurozone. I think that's consistent with the current consensus forecasts of what's going on in Europe. The effects of Europe on the U.S. economy, or the effects of a European financial implosion on the U.S. economy are, of course, very complicated. Part of that, you mentioned this earlier, Mr. Chairman, is the effect on our net exports. If they are out of work, buying less, one place they'll buy less from is here. But we think a more important channel of transmission from their problems to us is actually through the financial system. We've had a number of conversations on this topic with our panel of economic advisors in the past several meetings, and their view is that it's really on the financial side. I think the current understanding is that U.S. financial institutions don't have a lot of direct exposure to the most troubled economies in Europe. But as we saw in the financial crisis here, the danger comes not just from the one link away, it's 2 links or 3 links away in this very interconnected financial system.
Okay, let me sneak one last point in here. Currently, a huge debate really is about the expiration of the Bush tax cuts and differentiating them between the wealthy and the less well-off, okay? What is the effect of the Bush tax expiration on the top $250,000 income earners? I mean, how many dollars is that per year over a 10-year window versus the rest of the tax cuts?
So I don't have a precise number, but roughly, from the last time I've seen estimates of this sort from the staff of the Joint Committee on Taxation, who are the people who do those estimates, about 1/5 of the total amount of revenue related to the extension of the 2001, 2003, so on tax cuts is attributable to the top tax rates, and 4/5 is attributable to all the other provisions.
Put some numbers on that. What's top tax rates and how many dollars are we talking about?
So the total number that we show in our in the outlook is about $4.5 trillion for extending certain income tax and estate and gift tax provisions and indexing the AMT for inflation. So 1/5 of $4.5 trillion is about $900 billion.
Okay,
and then there's some debt service.
And when you say top income tax rates, that's income earners over, what's the cutoff?
I don't remember the exact cutoff, to be honest. Again, these are estimates the staff of the Joint Committee on Taxation does. They don't come directly from us, and I don't have those numbers at hand.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.